Hello, good morning. Welcome to the Wellness Committee Lunch and Learn. Today we are going to be focusing on stress management and coping with COVID-19. My name is Casey Siebenecker. I am the director of the Student Wellness Center at UT Dallas, and I'm also the chair of the Wellness Committee. We're very happy to have you and hope that you are able to get some really useful skills and information from our presentation today. Our host for the Lunch and Learn today is the Student Counseling Center, and I'll let the presenter introduce themselves here in a moment. I did want to remind everybody that you are muted during this presentation, but you are able to use the Q&A function. If you do have questions, please submit them and we will respond. The presenter will be pausing throughout the presentation to answer those questions. And also, if you would like closed captioning, you can turn on the closed captioning feature at the bottom of your page. And without further ado, we will, one more thing. I wanted to thank our producers. Pinky Reyes is here helping us out in the back of the house, and Taylor Tran is also here helping us out and making sure we run smoothly. And thank you to them for helping us. And without further ado, we're going to turn it over to our presenter.
All right. Well, thank you. Thanks for that intro, Casey, and thank you everyone for being here. My name is Dr. Alanna Carrasco Drummond. I'm a licensed psychologist with our Student Counseling Center and also a member of the Campus Wellness Committee. So I'm glad to be here today to, just share out some helpful information with you all, as Casey mentioned, about stress management and coping during the COVID-19 pandemic that we're all in right now. So just kind of looking at our presentation and giving you all a little bit of an idea of what's to come. Initially, I do want to talk about just some ideas and concepts behind stress and symptoms around stress in general. And then later into our presentation, I'll talk a little bit more about, again, the specific situation that we're in related to the COVID-19 pandemic, and just talking through some ways that you may recognize stress coming up or be experiencing stress happening differently for you during this time, and then talking through some ideas on how to manage that. And finally, we'll wrap up with a little stress management practice. We'll do a coronavirus anxiety meditation. So hopefully that is helpful and something that you can take with you. There will be some, as Casey mentioned, times throughout the presentation where you will be able to submit any questions that you have into the chat box. And so Casey will let you all know when that time is coming. She'll send out a little message on the chat, and then we'll be able to have a little bit more interaction during that Q&A time. So I suppose we'll move forward into our first slide. I think we can skip through the to start. That was some of the information on just expectations for the presentation. There we go. Okay, so that's just some of the reminders about closed caption and okay. So first, just going into, this idea that we all talk about, we all experience, what is stress? And I like to talk about this because I think sometimes there is some confusion around, kind of using that term, I feel stressed or I feel anxious, and just really wanting to hammer out what is stress and how do we know when that's happening for us. So stress is really a pretty simple concept, and it refers to how much or how the brain and body are responding due to any shift in our situations, changes in our environment or expectations. So, and that level of stress maybe will amplify or reduce depending on the demands of our environment and our actual or perceived resources that we have available to us in the moment. We'll talk a little bit about the different types of stress and how we may be impacted by those different few. And what we'll highlight is that not all stress is not good or unhelpful. There can be good and helpful stress as well. So we'll move into the next slide to first talk a little bit about helpful types of stress. So you all may have heard of the concept of eustress, which is a positive form of stress. It can be beneficial for our health, beneficial for our motivation, focus, performance. It's this idea that we, have maybe a demand in our environment, maybe a test coming up or a job interview, and we feel pretty well resourced to accomplish that task. Maybe we've been studying, or we've done some practice interviews, we've gotten feedback from others, and we feel ready, motivated, maybe even a little bit excited to take on that challenge. So some examples of eustress would be maybe the excitement, the intrigue we feel, on our first day at a new job. Riding a roller coaster, that one's a little iffy for me personally. I don't know that I feel any good stress about that, but some folks do feel eustress from the idea of kind of getting, an experience of excitement, but knowing that they're safely strapped in, they're going to, enjoy this moment and feeling like, they can manage that excitement. Learning a new hobby as well could be a form of eustress, and in the sense that, maybe there is a learning curve in this new hobby, or, something that might be challenging, but again, a person may also feel that confidence that, I'll be able to learn this. I have, all the items or the time to learn this new hobby, and feeling pretty able to manage that and grow from that. So those are some examples of eustress. Again, when we feel that we have the resources to take on some new demands in our life. So now moving into maybe some unhelpful forms of stress, we'll start with distress, which is our next slide here. So this is when our experience of demands and expectations, and then our resources, whether that's perception of our resources or our actual resources, those concepts are a bit more out of balance. So to start, we may feel that, there's a lot of expectation from outside, there's a lot of demands being placed on our time, and an example of perceiving that we do not have enough resources, maybe we're unaware of, offices in our university, or departments in our job place that could actually provide us some tools, provide us some helpful methods to be able to manage those types of issues. Or we may actually not have access, given, different variables in our life, different intersecting identities and connection to certain resources. We may experience a level of distress because we don't have access to those resources, and we really feel the demand and the rise of the expectation kind of overwhelming us. So again, some examples may be academic challenges. If you're feeling not well prepared for a certain course, or maybe a test coming up, you didn't get enough time to study, or there was something that came up in your life that didn't allow you to get all the material. Feeling overwhelmed by a new job, maybe feeling kind of moving into that you don't have all the tools, or you're kind of experiencing a sense of imposter syndrome, that maybe this isn't, what you're cut out for, or something like that. Ending of a relationship can be another form of distress, or even death or loss of a loved one, losing out on that resource or connection while feeling a high impact from, the demand that may come from, having to emotionally take care of yourself, or emotionally take care of others without that support. Okay, so we'll head to the next bubble, if you will. Okay, so now we're talking a little bit about acute stress. So in the breakdown of distress, there's acute and maybe more long-term stress. So acute stress might be something that we all initially kind of experienced at the beginning of this pandemic, thinking that, well, maybe I will have to work from home, or quarantine, or socially distance for the next month. Back in March, maybe we thought it was a little bit more temporary. So in that way, some of us may have felt ready to deal with acute stress, temporary. Not only am I now having to be quarantined at home, but I am still trying to finish my final exams, finish these projects, meet all of my work requirements for the end of the semester. And we may have felt like, well, this is a short-term situation. So even though, you know, these times are tough, I feel like I have enough left in me in this month, or I have enough resources that I can kind of get through this very acute stressor, because I feel like it might be short-term. So these are some more, you know, outside of the pandemic, or even maybe things happening during the pandemic for folks, examples of acute stress. So a job interview, again, knowing that it's time limited, we're going to really maybe feel some intense stress around it, but we know, well, after that 30 minutes or hour or however long, you know, I may be able to feel a bit back to normal. Having a presentation, getting a speeding ticket, preparing for an exam, we have a little bit more of that intense motivation or intense stress about it that initially feels a bit manageable because we know it's temporary. Okay, so now we'll move on to the next slide, which is chronic stress. So chronic stress is now maybe a little bit of what we are dealing with at this point. So we've been in quarantine, we've been experiencing the stress of this pandemic for many months now. It's becoming, you know, a little bit more chronic. We may be noticing that, well, this isn't, you know, these things that I thought were just going to be something that I had to deal with for the last month, you know, maybe working from home with my partner and getting distracted easily, or no longer having close connections or ways to meet up with my friends or family, you know, that is starting to take a toll. It's starting to feel familiar and almost kind of insidious. Like we may not really notice the effect that it's having on us because it has become part of our normal daily functioning. So it's recurring, it's long-term. Definitely many people are experiencing this related to COVID and some of the impacts and consequences of that. We've also seen just socially, you know, kind of more light being shown on experiences of chronic stress related to racism and oppression. So that is also surfacing during this time. People really feeling the effects, or, you know, noticing how it's impacting the community a bit more starkly in this moment. And so, yeah, not only are we dealing with the chronic stressor of COVID-19 and everything that comes with that, but we're also seeing that, you know, other traumas, other stressors are kind of being brought to the forefront for many folks at this time. So these are all things that can feel like over time we really start to feel a lot more of those intense symptoms of stress that maybe we wouldn't have had when it was an acute short-term stressor. But the chronic nature of this can lead us to start to feel some pretty impactful symptoms that we'll move into in a couple slides. But we'll head into the next slide here and go into what are some common stressors in the yellow bubble. Okay, so again, these are common stressors that we may all, or populations of us may experience just in what were our normal daily lives, right? So your transitions, your conflicts, changes or challenges in your family life, illness, right? Changes to your routine, and those are all listed throughout. But again, remembering that on top of this, you're also going through a global pandemic and everything that is coming with that: worry, anxiety, maybe feeling flooded by the news or health updates, maybe witnessing in your own personal lives, many people's health being affected, significant illness, people having to go into medical facilities, maybe also experiencing death and loss because of this pandemic. So on top of experiencing some of these common stressors, you know, there's the added element of doing all this amidst the pandemic and amidst some of these very unique stressors that there might be a good amount of us that haven't had to learn how to navigate that or work with that combination of concerns ever before in our lives. So I think that can also feel traumatic for many folks, as this isn't something that was expected. This isn't something that, you know, I've ever had to manage before. I've really lost out on a lot of resources, and didn't have much chance to plan or prepare myself. So this very much is feeling like a trauma for a lot of folks. So we can move on to the next slide to talk a little bit about symptoms. So these are some signs that maybe your stress level is beginning to feel a bit more heightened. Again, stress doesn't always necessarily mean that we are feeling a lot of these physical symptoms or emotional or cognitive symptoms. But if we begin to continuously feel like we do not have the resources or the capability to manage these stressors, we can begin to see that play out in a lot of our, again, physical, emotional, and cognitive life. So a lot of times we even have students coming into the counseling center, or maybe even initially going to the health center, because they're recognizing, yeah, I've felt a lot more tired, I'm feeling nauseous, having a lot of gastrointestinal issues, not sure what's going on with me. And then those medical professionals are able to identify, well, you know, we're not really seeing any physical cause for this. Could there be something that is, you know, overwhelming you? You're feeling heightened stress. So a lot of times we encourage people, you know, what's happening for your body in this moment? What are you noticing physiologically? Maybe you're noticing more aches and pains, or more anxiety. Your heart is racing. You're feeling dizzy. You're feeling you know, weaknesses in some areas of your body, which for some folks, I imagine that, I mean, that can feel anxiety provoking, as we're also thinking about these symptoms that have kind of been put on blast about COVID, right? If you're noticing, you know, maybe you're hyperventilating, you may feel some anxiety around, is that shortness of breath? What could that be? And so really wanting to, again, just as you're going throughout this experience, making sure to check in on your physical symptoms maybe daily, so you can notice, okay, what might be more connected to stress and what is something that maybe I should seek out some medical attention. In regards to emotional and cognitive symptoms, emotionally, again, we may feel a sense of overwhelm. There's too many activities or expectations for us to manage. We may feel depression and burnout. Sometimes the heightened stress that continues going on and on chronically. If you imagine that's kind of like a motor just going and going and going, at some point we slow down. At some point it becomes too much to manage, and we can kind of sink more into that fatigue, depression, just low energy, low motivation, feeling a lack of hopefulness or drive. Feeling like we're unable to function, right? Feeling like we don't have the resources or the emotional energy to accomplish some things.
Am I still good on the sound? I had a little notification that. Good? Okay. And then also emotionally, we may see, you know, some tendencies to want to disconnect. Again, we're already being made to socially distance and maybe not get to connect with community in a lot of ways that we normally were, but even feeling more of that withdrawal because we are feeling so overwhelmed, depressed, anxious, feeling more irritable. And then all of these can also impact or even show up for us cognitively. So feeling like it's hard to focus because maybe we are worried about our family or our health, freezing up, feeling that our thinking is foggy or scattered, having difficulty speaking because if we're struggling cognitively, our thoughts may not be coming out clearly as well. Feeling forgetful, compulsive thoughts or worrying. So this is where I do want to address where some folks may kind of wonder, you know, what is the difference between anxiety and stress? Well, when we see folks with anxiety concerns or generalized anxiety, most people are now at the point where, yes, they've had some, you know, maybe a series of acute stressors or long-term chronic stress, but now it's become to this point where it feels unmanageable and they're beginning to feel a lot of these symptoms, or they're beginning to feel like they cannot manage any of it. And so that's where we start to see, you know, once the stress feels unmanageable, that's when we would start to maybe talk about that as anxiety or some type of related anxiety issue. So I think at this point, Casey may have asked out in the chat if anyone has any questions this far. We're about partway through our presentation, but yeah, Casey, have we gotten any questions or feedback?
Yes, we have a question. The question is, how do we stop panicking or freaking out when someone sneezes or coughs near us during this time?
Well, I think, you know, for as much as possible, number one, following any health recommendations is one very concrete way that we can feel a little bit more in control of that experience. Because, you know, if you don't have maybe the access to grocery shop or get your groceries delivered or pick them up outside, there will be times where you are having to go into places, or if you're still going to work, you will have to interact with customers or colleagues, right? And we can't necessarily instruct everyone how to behave around us. So doing things like wearing a mask or staying distance from other people are some things that we can control, and we can remind ourselves in those moments, okay, yes, that person sneezed, like what is some of the reality of this situation? Yes, I do, you know, normalizing your anxiety response, because that is a way that right now is pretty expected to react, that we may react that way when we think about the meaning of a sneeze or what that can carry or how that can impact us. So I think first normalizing, like, okay, yeah, that's a little concerning, but then being able to take a couple deep breaths and say, well, what have I done to prepare myself in this moment? I am wearing a mask, right? I can move myself away. And, you know, just being able to remind ourselves that there are some things that we're doing to kind of mitigate some of that risk, and to kind of calm ourselves in the moment. And also just, you know, I think sometimes remembering some of the facts, like just because that person sneezed or coughed doesn't necessarily mean that they are, that they have this illness, or, you know, because I think we also want to be careful of making any assumptions about folks, because there are pieces also related to identity. If I see this person sneeze or cough, we don't want to make assumptions that could also be harmful towards that other person, that, oh, you sneezed or coughed, you're probably sick, get away from me, right? Because that just amps up the fear and anxiety even more. But I think simply acknowledging, like, oh yeah, I did feel afraid in that moment. You know, what can I do to control this situation and my response to that?
Thank you, Alanna. I think that was really great information. We have another question. The question is, how do I manage interacting or talking with family members or friends who choose not to follow mask ordinances or social distancing guidelines?
Yeah. Well, I think that's a great question, and I think one that we're all in some way or another struggling with. And it really speaks to boundary setting in this situation. Of course, boundary setting is important across the board in our relationships and what we're comfortable with and what we're not comfortable with. But specifically in this situation, I think it's really testing people from so many different backgrounds who maybe have not really had the experience of others setting boundaries with them, being told no, being told I'm not comfortable with this. And it's very important for everyone across the board, whether you are someone who is following the mask and social distance rules or you're not, to recognize that everybody is going to have their own feelings about this, their own ways that they want to approach it, and not to get caught up in the shaming, blaming, judgment of one another, but to be very clear if you are spending time with family, if you are going to maybe go see a friend, maybe you're gonna, meet up in a parking lot somewhere or go to a park, letting them know ahead of time, this is where I land. I do observe these rules and recommendations. If it feels like that's not something that we're in agreement on, then maybe we should perhaps just meet up over a virtual means or something like that. I think some folks who are living with others who maybe aren't respecting their boundaries or aren't observing some of the same guidelines, that's a little bit tougher, because you can't necessarily say, okay, roommate or, parent or sibling, I'll see you whenever, I'll chat with you over Zoom, because you are interacting in the same environment. So still, there are ways that you can say, it really makes me anxious when I see you coming back from work without your mask on, or when I know you're not social distancing when you go out in public. I hope that you can hear that impacts me and that I do feel fear and anxiety. And then still doing whatever you can, again, going back to what can I control in this situation. I've named and validated my feeling as much as possible to this person. And now are there ways that, maybe I do spend more time in my own room, or maybe in common areas, I make sure to do things like wash my hands, or maybe I do even wear a mask when I'm around that person or in common spaces in my home. So I do think it's unfortunate that people are landing differently on this, because there is a very, very real impact and threat of illness and death for some folks. But again, it goes back to being able to name that boundary and know that that is okay for you in the same instance.
Thank you, Alanna, for that response. We have another question, and it's basically how to handle the letdown of expectations that after the spring semester being canceled pretty much halfway through, being excited for the fall semester, being a little bit back to normal, and knowing that it most likely won't be a normal college semester. How to cope with that letdown and unmet expectation of that college experience that our students are hoping for.
Yeah. I'm really appreciative of this question, because there was a part that I might have forgotten to address, is the real grieving that is coming from this situation. Again, not only grief of loss of life or illness, but grieving of expectations, grieving of meaningful moments that we were maybe looking forward to, and again, normalizing that for oneself and reflecting on, that was something that I really had my hopes up for. That was an event or a semester that I had really been preparing for, this new experience or opportunity, and I'm either not going to get that or not going to get that in a lot of the same ways. And it's definitely understandable that I feel frustrated, angry about that, maybe cheated in some ways. Of course, not intentionally, but I think, just reminding ourselves that those are our normal responses to grieving that loss. But then, maybe spending some time reflecting for yourself, like, what was it about this semester that I was really looking forward to? Maybe I was looking forward to this new internship, or a club that I joined, and being able to connect with new people, or being able to be in a leadership role. And are there still ways that, even if it's not getting to happen in the same way that I had hoped for, are there still ways that I can pull out some of those moments that I was really looking forward to? So maybe if you're not getting to do an internship in person this semester.
Can you hear me, Casey? Okay. For some reason, I'm glitching on my volume on this end, so let me know if you can't hear me. But what I was saying was, really reflecting on what was important to me about that experience, because chances are there may be some ways that you can still highlight some of those goals and try to accomplish them in different ways. If it was, getting more exposure to your professional area of interest, are there ways that you can, volunteer or connect online? Right now, they're having so many free webinars and professional networking events that are actually maybe more accessible for folks than previously, because maybe you had to sign up or you had to be available at a certain time, date, or location. So really seeking out, are there other ways for me to still get a little taste of that experience that I was going to have, yes, knowing full well it may not, at least in this time frame, be exactly what I was hoping. But maybe there are still pieces that I can take with me in hopes that I will be able to get back to that experience in a future semester. Because you never know what the benefit may be in doing some of these things virtually or in a distanced way. We are seeing that there might be some more opportunity and access for folks in ways that they didn't have before. But yeah, definitely wanting to normalize the loss that can come from not having some of those exciting things to look forward to.
Thank you, Alanna. That is all the questions we have for now.
Okay. Well, we will move on forward. We'll have more time for more questions towards the end. We are about partway through. So we'll head into now talking a little bit more about some ideas and strategies to use to cope with stress in a pandemic. So first, let's highlight what is maybe some of not the best ways to cope. And really all of these are under the umbrella of avoiding stress, right? Or avoiding maybe what we're feeling in the moment. So a good way to deal with stress is to address it, right? Maybe a not good way is to avoid it, kind of put it on the back burner, pretend it's not happening. And the list here highlights the different ways that we as people tend to avoid stress. So yeah, denial, right? I don't have time for this. This isn't, maybe it's not as bad as I think it is, or maybe I'm not really being as impacted as much as, again, maybe I am feeling some physiological symptoms, or there's some cognitive slowing down or emotional overwhelm that I just haven't allowed myself the time and the pause to tap into. For some, we may see overextending energy, right? So maybe trying to do a lot of things and trying to be in a lot of different roles, taking on more tasks as a way of busying their schedule, or it could even be overextending energy in regards to procrastinating on, some of the responsibilities that you still have, and instead, trying to get out of the house too frequently. Maybe you're going on 5 walks a day and you're really trying to overextend yourself because you're worried you're not going to get, your usual amount of physical activity. And in that process, kind of moving away from a balance of your activities and some of those self-care coping skills. So overextending your energy might be something to watch out for as well. Self-medicating with alcohol and drugs, pretty straightforward. I mean, when we consume alcohol and drugs, that does alter our state of awareness or state of functioning. And so that is one way that we notice folks tending to avoid or try to forget or just alter their state of awareness around stress. Eating too much or too little. We see that for many people, eating can be a form of finding control or trying to control what does feel for most of us like a lot of uncertainty or moments of really lacking control. And so eating too much, or ignoring our appetite, or not eating as a way to kind of manage some of our stress are things to look out for as well. And it's really important in this situation, again, not to shame or judge others or yourself around eating behaviors, but to pay attention and recognize, what's my baseline? What's my norm? And yeah, maybe every once in a while, are there ways that I'm engaging with food that don't feel comfortable, and how can I kind of bring myself back to my baseline? Again, sleeping too much or too little, that might be a way that we see folks kind of avoiding stress rather than finding a way to kind of let out some anxious energy. Maybe they just are going to sleep to kind of take a break from the world, which can, again, all of these things can be okay in limitation, but if it's too much or too little, that might be a time where we need to kind of reassess how we're managing stress. Isolating from others. Yes, there is the very real requirement or guideline of social distancing and quarantining. And for many people, Zoom or house party or things like that are becoming just, it's not really meeting the same need, but that doesn't mean that, we fully disconnect from that, but still trying to find ways to stay connected with others as much as possible to meet that social need, because we are social creatures. And then finally, procrastinating. What are some things that, do I need to go grocery shopping? Do I need to maybe go to my doctor to get some things checked out? And I'm really feeling a bit fearful of what I may learn, or what I might find out, or what I may encounter. And so I'm kind of pushing that off to the side, because I am feeling like I want to avoid these stressful situations. And how can I maybe take small steps at a time to address some of those things on my task list. Okay, so now we'll move into healthy coping. All right, so this slide is a little bit congested, but like I said earlier, I think when we think of what are some healthy ways to cope, I envision, if you just imagine yourself for a moment kind of leaning into the stress, right? If you feel a worry, or this idea of, I might not be able to manage this, kind of pausing yourself and saying, okay, what's making me worried about this? Do I have the tools? Can I reach out to resources or loved ones for some support? Or is there something I need to maybe pause and kind of reassess my strategy? So really approaching it, kind of thinking through it, and allowing ourselves to feel maybe a little bit of that uncertainty or unsteadiness, and not necessarily just move away from it. So that does require us to recognize some of the symptoms of stress, like from that list earlier. Am I someone that tends to physically manifest stress in my life, or do I notice shifts for myself emotionally or in my thinking? So really being aware of what are my signs of stress, what are things that stress me out in particular, being aware of what are some of your common stressors. Maybe engaging with family in or out of a pandemic has always been stressful for you. So being able to prepare yourself for the stress that you can identify or that you can predict, right? And finding ways to kind of anchor in some self-care, validating that those are difficult experiences for you from the get-go, so that way it doesn't feel like all of these stressors are compounding on you at once. Altering your perceptions of stressors. I like this point, but I also just like to be tentative around it, because there are some ways that we can alter our perceptions. Again, does this feel like a looming expectation that I can't address or can't manage? Or are there maybe some ways that I haven't quite been thinking about that I could I delegate? Could I reach out? Could I maybe push back a deadline? Could I set a boundary, right? Or there might be very real pieces for folks where, no, this is a stressor and this is something that I don't have the access to some of those resources or skills. And so also just, wanting to hold that for folks, that there might be some of these very acute or traumatic stressors that are happening that we can't and shouldn't have to alter our perception of. Going through some of the points, healthy coping can be increasing or improving your time management, maybe even making changes to your environment. If you're working from home, or studying from home, we've heard a lot of folks just having a hard time with kind of drawing that boundary, like, okay, when work is over, I leave my computer, my notepads, whatever, at my desk or in this certain room, or when the class is over, I step out of where I'm studying and I take a break. I don't, make my bed the same place where I take my quizzes or where I answer phone calls, giving yourself some structure, because you don't have that in the same way that you might have in your office or classroom or in the library or something like that. So really setting up for yourself a little bit of structure and organization around how you're spending your time, and trying to have that mimic a little bit more the environment that you would normally be in. Avoiding unnecessary stress, that can be really important. Are there things that maybe you don't have to address right in this moment? You can kind of circle back to maybe a home improvement project or something that you wanted to get done this summer, but right now it just feels like a lot, and it was something that was maybe more for your enjoyment, or that wasn't like a necessity. Can you push that back if it feels like it's not necessary? Kind of mentioned setting appropriate boundaries. And then also in that time management, environment management, and organizing and creating some time for fun, connection, relaxation, self-care. A lot of times we think, well, if I make too much time for that, will I become lazy? You know, if I get too much invested in the self-care or relaxation, am I just going to spiral into, you know, just doing nothing and watching Netflix on the couch for hours? Not necessarily, not if we make that part of our daily activities. We insert that, even if it's for 15 minutes in our day, we say, oh, this is my time to, you know, look at some cute puppy videos on YouTube, or call a friend, or, you know, if it's becoming more of a part of our schedule and our structure, chances are we're not going to necessarily kind of spiral into just being consumed by that and feeling what we may call lazy. And then knowing for yourself, maybe you will need some of those days where you just disconnect from all of it. Maybe you spend a day or an afternoon on the weekend, yeah, just kind of relaxing and not having to structure your time around other activities. And then remembering that if this is an acute stressor, if this is something temporary, you know, how it might pass and what are ways that you can manage it in the moment, and reframing, is this an acute stressor? Is this more long-term? And I like to use the metaphor, is this a marathon or a sprint? If it's a sprint, yeah, how can I harness my resources? Maybe I won't get a good night's sleep tonight because I'm going to be dealing with this acute stressor, but I know, you know, I can catch up on sleep, or I can recover tomorrow or this weekend. If it's a marathon, yes, maybe this idea of not getting sleep, that's not going to last me over the week, or that's not going to last for a whole month. So what are some things that I need to build into my schedule over this longer time period? Maybe taking more naps, or, you know, maybe refraining from drinking alcohol or using substances, because that can impact my energy and motivation in doing that for a longer time period. So one way that I want to highlight, I think, is a really great way to tap into, you know, recognizing what you may need and what may be most helpful in the moment, is on our next slide. And that's the needs wheel. It's a little bit hard to see, but it's definitely something that you all can Google. And I find this really helpful for if we are feeling either stressed, or we notice that our mood has shifted, we're feeling down, we're feeling a lack of motivation, just kind of, again, pausing maybe for 30 seconds and saying, okay, what am I needing right now? Maybe I'm feeling nervous. Maybe I'm feeling vulnerable. I need, you know, some protection. Is there somebody that I can reach out to who is a safe person, who can help me to advocate for what I need? Maybe I'm needing something, I'm trying to see where it might be on here, but just nourishment, right? Have I eaten today? Have I been drinking enough water? Maybe that is something that's affecting my low energy or my anxious thoughts. Well-being, right? Is there something that I've experienced that I'm feeling kind of hurt from? Do I need something to practice healing? Do I need, you know, to engage in some relaxing or validating kind of practice to normalize the pain, or not normalize, but validate the pain and stress that I've been going through? So I know we're getting close to the end of time, and I want to make enough space for our meditation or mindfulness activity and questions. So this is something to look up that I really encourage folks to maybe download or take a picture of, that can help you just check in with what you're needing in the moment, and then respond to that as you feel would be most helpful. Okay, so we'll go to the next bubble. So again, these are some of just some very quick strategies that we kind of talked about in the previous slide of how to practice healthy coping. So I've mentioned throughout, you know, pausing, taking a few deep breaths, scheduling time for enjoyable activities. Journaling can be a really good way for folks to, again, begin to reflect on their emotions, their needs. What are some things that are going well or that you're doing well in your life? Not just necessarily a journal for venting or, you know, some of our more negative experiences, but what's going well. Prioritizing your responsibilities, setting goals for yourself. We've talked a little bit about time management, talking about or leaning into your stress, approaching it rather than avoiding it. Again, developing a routine that works for you, that includes self-care, that mimics maybe a little bit of what time at the office or time on campus would have looked like for you. practicing mindfulness and muscle relaxation or any type of grounding, physiological grounding activity. And then, of course, getting sleep, because if we're not getting sleep, we're not eating or nourishing ourselves, all of these things may be off when it could be a very just simple practice of resting our bodies. So on the next slide, there's a little idea here for you all to try out. Don't feel pressure. You don't have to share it out. But maybe even for yourself, just making a note right now of, okay, so what's one goal, one thing that I might try out for this week, the rest of the summer, maybe for my fall semester, of what I might do to try and manage stress differently. Doesn't have to necessarily be better, worse, but just differently, trying something different. So like I said, I encourage people to write out your goal now. If you do want to share it in the chat, go for it. But here are some examples. So, you know, maybe if we've really been working hard, we've been showing up to work as much as possible during this whole pandemic, maybe asking for a day off later this month, or taking a sick day or a mental health day, and knowing that we can delegate some of the activities to our colleagues, or that those things will, you know, be there and be able to get taken care of when we come back. Practicing mindfulness for a few minutes each day. It doesn't have to be that you go on a whole mindfulness retreat, but just that you invest a little time each day. Challenging some of our negative perceptions or negative thoughts. You know, I must right now have my house tidy all the time, or I'm a failure, and knowing, well, no one's going to be coming over anytime soon. So is that really a realistic expectation for me to continue to set? I know there's been a lot of parents who, you know, are working from home with children, and I've heard things like, well, I really have historically felt not okay about them being on the TV too much or on the iPad too much, and just knowing for yourself, like, well, maybe sometimes right now, all we have is the iPad, right? They can't go outside, it's 105 degrees, can't go connect with friends, and just, you know, some of these expectations that we had prior to, maybe, you know, relaxing on some of those requirements a bit, and just being compassionate towards yourself and your family. Setting boundaries with your partner or your roommate, you know, things that you're needing, ways you're needing support in your home, ways that you can delegate chores or responsibilities. And then also ideas around finding time to virtually connect with others. Maybe that means more sporadically, right? Maybe you're doing too much connecting with family, or maybe it means, I haven't reached out to a friend or, you know, someone close to me in a while. Could there be some benefit in that? So keep those in mind for thinking about a goal that you may set to manage your stress or reduce it. And then we'll head to the next slide. So these are just some resources that Casey is going to drop in the chat that are resources for our staff and employees. Staff and students and faculty members. And really anyone. The first two are just some free meditation and mindfulness websites and tools. The third is a link to the UT Dallas Employee Assistance Program if you feel like, you know, meeting with a counselor through that avenue might be helpful. And then just some more tips and facts on stress management and different types of stress. Those will be in the chat for you to copy and paste into your own notes. And then we'll go to the next slide here. And we'll get to do a mindfulness practice together. So this is I will not take ownership of this coronavirus anxiety meditation script. It's from the link that is listed above there. Really great meditation. You can read through it, or there's even a recording of it on this website if you feel like this is something you want to do more regularly. So I know I've been flying through this presentation, so I do want to ground myself in this time that we're going to have together right now. A couple tips around practicing any type of mindfulness activity or meditation is remembering that there is no one right way to do this. I think a lot of folks, sometimes we have the misconception that mindfulness or meditation is meant to just kind of erase all thoughts or emotions or worries from our mind and our awareness, and that is not what mindfulness is. It's meant as a practice to give us some skill and some practice around refocusing our attention to the present moment, whether that's our breath, whether that's sights and sounds and smells that we're noticing around us, but just practicing building your mental muscle of refocusing your attention on the present and refocusing on, you know, what you're feeling in the moment, what's coming up for you, and knowing that that's okay. So again, mindfulness also does not mean to wipe away any of the pain, suffering, or anxiety that we might be experiencing, but to help us to feel like we can manage that, we can be present with those emotions, and they don't have to overtake us. So to get started with our coronavirus anxiety meditation, with the idea that there's no one right way, I will ask for everyone who's present with us today to take a few deep breaths, and I do also want to express my gratitude that you're here. So if you'd like, some people choose to kind of close their eyes or maybe dim the lights around them, or just even focus their gaze on a point on the floor or the space ahead of you if you don't feel comfortable closing your eyes. So find whatever position is comfortable for you in your chair or wherever you're at. Just start with taking a couple deep breaths. We'll do that together, and then I'll walk us through this. So first, deep breath. Taking that air in, filling your belly, and then letting it out. And now we'll do that with a bit more intention. So taking a deep breath in, fill your belly with air and expand it as big as you can. And when you can't take in any more breath, exhale all the air through your nose. And breathe in one more time, a deep breath. And let it all out. And now start to bring your breath into whatever its normal rhythm is. Breathing in and out, however feels comfortable. And start to bring your attention onto your body. Feeling your chest rise and fall with the motion of your breathing. Feeling the cool air in your nose as you breathe in, and the warm air in your nose as you breathe out. Feel your shoulders lower and relax. Feel your jaw release. Feel your arms get heavier and sink into relaxation. And feel your legs get heavy and relax. Notice your body melt deeper into your relaxed position. Continuing to breathe out any extra tension or pain that might be present. And as you sit here, notice that thoughts may be popping up in your mind. And that's okay. Maybe these thoughts look like headlines or images you've been seeing on the news. Perhaps these thoughts look like numbers, number of cases, number of deaths, number of the market impact. Maybe these thoughts are about the impact on you, how it can or is already affecting your life, your health, your business, your school, your children, your schedule, your community and family. Maybe these thoughts are heavy with visions of all the worst case scenarios painted bright in your mind. See all of these thoughts inside of your head, watching as they swirl around, creating a hurricane of worry, stress, anxiety, and fear. Feel the energy of that hurricane and how powerful it is right now. All of this energy that you've been carrying around day after day, and it's impacting everything in your life. Your focus, your sense of safety and health, your activities, your connection with others. Just take a moment to look at that hurricane as it swirls strongly in front of you. And notice something very important about it. Notice the distinction between the facts and the emotions. The facts are standing still outside the hurricane, and the emotions, the fear, the stress, the worry, the anxiety, are what's causing the motion of the hurricane. And they're completely normal emotions to be feeling right now. So take a deep breath in this moment, looking at this hurricane of emotion outside of you, and realize that you're in charge of whether or not you allow its energy in today. You have your life to live today, and although the coronavirus is very real and deserves your attention, this is the moment where you get to decide whether you invite in the facts that will help you navigate your day, or whether you will be sucked into the chaos of the hurricane of emotions. And no matter what you decide, it's okay. Continue your day and recognize these emotions as they arise and honor those emotions. Let this visualization be your container to hold it all in. And while you get connected to the present moment, to what is actually in your life right now, remember that you choose what you pay attention to and what you can let go of. Just taking a couple more deep breaths. Feel your body rise and fall. Breathe in gratitude for this moment together. And when you're ready, you may return to the present moment. And we'll wrap up our mindfulness activity. Thank you all for practicing that. So I imagine we may have a couple more questions, and I know we have a couple more minutes, so I want to allow time for that if there are any questions, Casey.
Yes, we have one question here, and it is in relation to assisting others cope with COVID. And so the question specifically is if they've already recommended people who are wanting to, they have anxiety not being able to go out and see friends, maybe go to restaurants with them, and that's something they enjoyed and something normal, that they've already given their friend advice that, you need to accept this as your new normal, and we need to come to peace with this is how things are right now. What, in addition to that, would you give to us to give advice to others on how to cope?
Sure. Well, I encourage folks that I think it can be, part of our nature to want to give out advice and to encourage others, of the facts of the situation and try and offer some of our ideas. And at the same time, I think it could be helpful to maybe ask the friend, what would be most helpful for you in this moment? What are you missing the most about being able to go get dinner together, right? Is it the conversation? Is it getting to share a meal? Is it getting to eat together? And seeing what that person gives you, and then maybe kind of constructing together a creative way to, again, it may not be the same as it was. There might be a bit of a new normal, but are there ways that you can still cook together, right? Can you individually make your own foods and kind of come together over FaceTime or virtually and eat as a group? If you enjoyed spending time together making meals, you know, can you share out some recipes amongst one another? Or are there other ways that that person may feel like gathering together in community or sharing with one another could be helpful? So I think that's somewhere where sometimes we forget to check in, like, yeah, what's the hardest part about this for you? And how can I help? Or what are some things that we can think of together? So that would be my recommendation, is asking that person, what do you need in this moment? How can I be most supportive? Because yes, this is really difficult, and I understand that you're missing that experience together.
All right, thank you. That was our last question.
Okay. Well, that is the end of my presentation, unless there's anything I'm forgetting. But I don't know if you, Casey, have anything else that you'd want to say to wrap up, but thank you all for being here, and feel free to reach out to, you know, us at the Counseling Center. If you do have any more questions, you can just reach our office through email, or we're available by phone as well, and you can check us out on the UT Dallas website.